Hi, I'm the woman who gave 9 years of my life to save my family's business. Late nights, missed holidays, every win credited to someone else. And when I finally reached for the promotion I'd earned, my brother, my boss, looked me in the eye and said, "Adequate, not ready." My parents just nodded. I walked out that day, and the moment I stopped holding it all together, the cracks they'd been hiding split wide open. 2 days later, my phone lit up. 182 missed calls. But by then, the only thing left for me to decide was whether I'd even answer. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. I want to know. Light rain stitched the windows as I walked into the boardroom with a blue folder tucked under my arm. The place smelled like burned coffee and lemon cleaner. Thursday ritual. My seat had been nudged to the far end of the table, away from the projector, away from the view. Beside every director sat a crystal tumbler. At my spot, a paper cup with a soft rim that collapsed if you held it wrong. Calder's pen made a neat tick, tick, tick on the wood, a little metronome for control. I set the folder down and opened it to the first page. The client I'd nursed back from the ledge in January, the one that paid a quarter of payroll. I spoke plainly. Numbers, timelines, cost savings, the midnight calls in Denver, the way our vendor network finally synced. I didn't sell it. I didn't have to. The room had lived this fire and walked out dry because I kept the hose running. Calder leaned back. Thin smile. "Adequate," he said. "Not ready for promotion." The word landed like the dull thud of a door that doesn't quite shut. My mother's eyes flicked to my father. He gave the smallest nod, the kind men give when they've already decided. "Let's not make this personal," she offered, which meant we absolutely would. A director shifted, throat clearing into his sleeve. The projector fan whirred, warm and indifferent. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. 9 years unspooled in the space of a breath. The winter I slept under my desk during the rail strike. The 4th of July when I missed fireworks to rewrite a disaster plan. The day a supplier tried to bully us and I didn't blink. When a crisis showed up, I showed up first. When the praise arrived, it took a wrong turn and shook my brother's hand. Calder tapped the pen again. "Let's move the Ellison discussion to later. We're done here." I closed the folder. No sound, just the soft thap of cardboard against paper. Everyone waited for me to argue. I didn't. I slid the chair back, smoothed my skirt, and stood. Someone murmured my name like a warning. My father stared at the tabletop, as if the grain might save him the trouble of seeing me. "Thank you for your time," I said. It wasn't drama. No raised voice. No speech. Just the click of my heels carrying me down the hallway past photos of men shaking hands in better suits than they wore to work, past the framed article about family values at the heart of American manufacturing, past the receptionist who mouthed, "You okay?" and then didn't wait for the answer. The elevator button was cold. The floor numbers glowed red, falling toward me. I lifted my wrist and looked at the watch, my father's old silver one, the gift he pressed into my palm when I signed on. "You'll be the steady one," he'd said then, proud and certain. The face caught the boardroom light and threw it back in a flat little circle. Behind me, the conference door opened. Calder's voice, casual in that careful way. "She'll come around. She always does." My mother's reply was softer. "She's emotional." The door sighed shut again. I remembered the first time a title skipped me. "It's just business," Calder had said, as if business were a weather pattern. Nobody's fault when it rained. I learned to bring an umbrella for both of us. I learned to keep spare umbrellas in the closet, for the line of people who swore they didn't need one. The elevator arrived with a tone that felt too polite for the moment. Inside, everything was chrome and reflected rain. I could see myself in the back panel. Hair in place, lipstick unsmudged, the posture of a woman who refuses to flinch. The doors began to glide together. 9 years, I thought. And all I got today was a paper cup and a word meant to keep me small. Adequate. Not a measure of performance, just a cage with polite corners. The doors paused, bounced, and opened again when someone rushed past, then closed once more. I didn't stick my hand out. I didn't go back. People who love you will ask you to tolerate the very thing that breaks you. They will call it patience, or family, or keeping the peace. But peace isn't real if only one person has to bleed for it. As the doors finally met, the watch's second hand ticked over a notch. That tiny motion felt louder than Calder's pen, louder than the word, louder than the nod. The elevator began to move. My body understood before my mind admitted it. My season of putting out fires for men who swore they never played with matches was done. There would be fallout. There is always fallout when the person holding the net steps back and says, "No more." Somewhere between floors, my phone vibrated in my bag. Once, then twice, then a stutter of insistence. I didn't reach for it. I pressed my thumb to the cool edge of the silver watch and kept my eyes on the numbers. As the elevator doors closed, my phone buzzed, but I didn't pick up. By the time the elevator settled and the lobby doors breathed me out onto the sidewalk, the drizzle had thickened into a patient curtain. I pulled my coat tight, slipped the phone from my bag, and let the screen wake my face. 6 missed calls, 5 from Calder, 1 from my mother. A text from him sat on top like a warning light. "Call me back. Now." I watched the screen buzz in my palm and let it quiet on its own. The rattle of the L, the hiss of buses, the wet slap of tires. City noise stitched the space between my ribs and the decision I wasn't ready to say out loud. I turned east toward Wabash, past the florist with buckets of damp tulips, past the newsstand where a stack of business journals bragged about family ingenuity. The pavement had gone a deep, reflective gray that caught every passing light and stretched it thin. I didn't hurry. I tucked my chin into my scarf and let the walk scrape the boardroom out of me. A memory rose, uninvited. 5 years back, a vendor strike stranded half our inventory in Joliet. Procurement froze, shipping panicked, phones rang so hard they sounded angry. I drove out at dawn, sat in a break room with a foreman who hadn't slept, and offered a fix no one wanted because it required swallowing pride. It worked by noon. We made delivery with a weekend to spare. That Monday, the update went to the board, and the story had a different author. "Team effort," Calder told them, clapping me on the shoulder the way a coach does to a kid who ran the water. My father met my eye afterward and said, "That's what family does." As if invisibility were a love language, my phone lit again. Mom this time. I let it go dark. Keeping the peace is always the daughter's job. It was the job I was resigning. At the corner, I stopped under the awning of a pawn shop and slid the leather-bound notebook from my bag. The spine is cracked where my thumb rests every time. Habit. Inside are scribbles, flowcharts, cleaner ways to run what we insist on gumming up. Strategies no one upstairs wanted me to lead because ideas from the helper are somehow less valid. I flipped to a page labeled in pencil. If we ever decide to run like a real company. The rain pricked the edge of the paper, a tiny constellation, and I tucked it away. The bell over the coffee shop door gave the same chime it had when I was 20, when I studied in the back corner and believed competence would translate into open doors. Cinnamon and espresso wrapped me, warmer than it had any right to. "Haven't seen you in a minute," Gus said from behind the counter, wiping his hands on a towel. Same thick glasses, same easy smile. "Busy season," I said, which was true most months of my life. "You look like you need the usual." "Make it a large." I slipped into the booth by the window, the one with the scar on the tabletop where someone once carved a heart and changed their mind. The phone hummed again. A voicemail came through. The transcription previewed across the top. I hit play because curiosity can be a stubborn itch. "Call me back," Calder's voice snapped. "This isn't funny." Funny. I thought of the paper cup at the end of the boardroom table. I thought of the way my father stared at the wood grain, hunting for a not to blame. I saved the message for 3 seconds, then deleted it and watched the icon vanish like a trick. Gus set the cup down with a quiet clink and a look that hovered between concern and respect. You okay? I'm fine, I said, and for once it wasn't a reflex. It was a choice. Just catching my breath. He nodded. Well, you tell whoever's chasing you to wait. Coffee's a church rule in here. I smiled at that and let the steam warm my face. Outside, a couple argued under a shared umbrella, their hands moving in that careful way people use when the words are worse than the weather. I listened to the soft chorus of tampers and milk wands and the scrape of chairs, and I let my own pulse slow to match. I pulled the notebook back out, turned to a clean page, and wrote 3 lines. What happens if I don't fix it this time? What happens if I do? Who do I become either way? Calder called again. I flipped the phone over so the screen faced the table. My mother texted, Sweetheart, don't be dramatic. Your brother has a lot on his plate. Call him. I pictured her at the kitchen island, holding the phone with both hands like it might bite. Drama is a word people use when you introduce a boundary they didn't plan on respecting. Gus refilled my water without asking. You still writing those lists? He asked, nodding at the notebook. He used to watch me cram for exams, long columns of tasks that kept the chaos quiet. Some habits never retire, I said. Well, he said, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret, sometimes the list needs a name at the top that isn't your brother's. He moved on to the next table and left the thought dangling between the plants and the rain. I chewed the inside of my cheek and let it sit there. In another life, I might have walked back to the office, smoothed it over, carried the weight while they argued about whether a woman could lift like that. Today, I sat in a booth with my coat half off and decided to do nothing. Not the vengeful kind of nothing. The principled kind. A man at the counter said into his phone, Look, own it. Don't spin it. The words dropped into me like a stone. Own it. Okay. I owned the part where I taught people I'd always be the safety net. I owned the part where I made it easy to overlook me because I was efficient and quiet and allergic to credit. I did not own the part where other adults treated my labor like a faucet they could turn on with a frown. I finished the coffee and checked the time. The day hadn't burned down yet. It just felt like it might. My phone, face down, thrummed once more. I didn't flip it over. I slid the notebook back into my bag, zipped my coat, and stood. As I reached for the door, the bell chimed again. A couple came in and shook themselves dry. The woman laughed at something and then sighed, that soft sound you make when hope has been postponed, not canceled. I let them pass and stepped out into the damp air that had turned the street into a mirror. At the corner, I waited out a light and finally looked at the phone. 6 missed calls. I thumbed into settings and dragged the little slider to silent. A decision doesn't need applause. It just needs to be made. I headed toward the river, boots careful on slick concrete, the outline of the afternoon folding itself around me. I didn't plan a speech. I didn't plan anything at all. I gave myself permission to leave a mess I didn't make exactly where it belonged. I thought walking away would buy me peace. But by morning, the storm had already started. Morning crept in without asking. I woke to the pale light pooling on the ceiling and the thin chill that slips under windows in early spring. The apartment was quiet enough to hear the radiator tick. I made coffee the way I do when I need a steady hand, no sugar, no pause, and carried the mug to the small kitchen table where the mail still sat from yesterday. The phone lay face down. I flipped it over and skimmed past the missed calls to my inbox. One subject line pinned my eyes. Urgent. It was from the CEO of our largest account. No small talk, no good morning, just a single paragraph that did its job. Need clarification on your departure. Until we understand the transition, all orders are on hold. I set the mug down, careful not to splash. A hold from them didn't mean noise. It meant a quiet that knocks the air out of a quarter. They only ever emailed me when they needed calm, never when they wanted theater. I read it again to confirm what I already knew. They trusted the person who answered at 2 a.m., who told them the truth when it cost us, who called before the fire caught. That person was not my brother. Steam curled off the coffee. I let it warm my face and turned the laptop toward me. My fingers hovered above the keys out of habit. The reflex to fix, to reassure, to make everyone comfortable. I didn't type. I let the reflex pass like a false alarm. The memory arrived with the smell of the coffee. The first week I handled their account alone. A storm had stitched up 2 states, and trucks were stranded like toy cars in a child's room. Their VP called me with a voice that tried to sound unbothered. I heard the tremor below it. We rerouted, slept in shifts, and delivered a day ahead. No one applauded. They sent me a silver pen in a plain box with a note that said, "Thank you for moving mountains without making a speech." It's in the drawer beside me now, resting against paper clips and a spare key. I slid the drawer open and took the pen out. It has a small scratch near the clip where I dropped it rushing to a call 3 years ago. I rolled it between my fingers, left, right, left, feeling the weight of it settle the way good decisions do. I wasn't sentimental about things, but this one wasn't a thing, it was proof. The phone buzzed. A text from Calder lit the screen. "You have to come in today. Clients are panicking. This is on you, on me." I let the words sit there. Ownership had always been my department, but not like that. I took a slow sip, not to think, but to give my pulse a minute to honor the shift. If the biggest account paused, cash flow kinked. If cash flow kinked, people listened. I didn't write back. Another email popped up, this one from their operations lead, copied to the CEO. "We need your confirmation that the transition plan you discussed last quarter is still valid. If not, we will postpone the Q2 rollout." I remembered that call. I'd argued for a staged implementation instead of the showy flip Calder pitched. They'd agreed with me because I'd given them numbers, not adjectives. I dragged the cursor to the corner of the screen and minimized the window. The apartment was still. That silence didn't feel empty. It felt like the inside of a vault. My mother's name flashed across the phone. I let it ring out, then the voicemail icon appeared. I didn't open it. I knew the tone without hearing it. "Sweetheart, be reasonable. Help your brother. Don't make waves. It's the family business. Family." The word had started to feel like a password that only worked one way. I stood, refilled the mug, and weaved back to the table. The radiator hissed. On the counter, last night's mail leaned against a bowl of fruit that had tried its best to be a centerpiece. I sat and placed the pen on the table, parallel to the laptop, as if a straight line could keep me honest. The truth was simple enough to fit on a sticky note. They need me more than I need them. It wasn't pride. It was math, contacts, history, crisis muscle memory. People say no one is irreplaceable to sound pragmatic. Sometimes it's just a line people repeat when they can't bear to admit who held the walls up. Another text, "Come in by 10. We can fix this if you stop being stubborn." I typed 3 words, "Not coming in," then deleted them. Silence can be a sentence. I put the phone face down again and breathed the way I do before running. In until it almost hurts, out until it's almost gone. My loyalty didn't vanish. It reoriented. It would go to the people who valued the work, not the story about the work. I opened the notebook I'd carried since college, the leather smoothed by years of being handled when I needed a plan. The first pages were full of cheap pens and ambition. The later ones had systems that saved us without anyone noticing. I added a line under yesterday's questions. What do I owe people who mistake endurance for consent? I closed the notebook and looked out the window. A slate sky, a hawk riding the crosswind between buildings, a woman walking her dog in a yellow raincoat that made its own weather. My phone trembled again. Another text from Calder, a second from our controller, one from a director who never spoke to me without a calendar invite. I didn't touch it. I picked up the pen and clicked it once. The sound was small and precise. I pictured the boardroom, the paper cup at the end of the table, my mother's careful nod. I pictured the email with hold in the middle of it like a stop sign no one could walk around. Something inside me set like concrete. I reopened the laptop and drafted a short reply to the client. Professional, clean, true. I'm not in the office. Transition details are incomplete. I'll follow up with a timeline once governance is confirmed. No heroics, No apologies for a decision that wasn't mine. When I finished, I didn't send it. I saved it as a draft and closed the lid. Timing matters. My father called. I let it pass. Then the apartment returned to its own sounds. The clock on the stove, the soft hum of the fridge, the faint street noise 4 floors down. I rinsed my mug, set it on the rack, and wiped the ring it left on the table with the heel of my hand. Small order in the middle of big disorder. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. Anger is hot and brief. This was cool and durable. I finally understood the simplest piece. I didn't have to convince anyone today. I didn't have to run across town and hold up a ceiling built to collapse. I could watch what happened when the person who always shows up doesn't. By noon, my phone wasn't just buzzing. It was shaking. I'd left it on the coffee table while making tea, and every time it lit up, the vibration rattled against the wood. At first, I thought it was just my brother again, but when I picked it up, the notifications stacked in a blur. Emails, texts, even a few missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. The first ones were from him, of course. "We need to talk. Urgent." Then, "Call me now." Followed by, "This is spiraling. You have to step in." His messages grew more frantic with each minute. I let them sit there, unopened after the first few. Then came emails from department heads I barely spoke to anymore. They weren't asking how I was. They were asking what I was going to do about the chaos. It was funny, in a bitter way. Months ago, they'd all looked past me like I didn't exist. Now they suddenly remembered I had a direct line to the clients they were desperate to keep. I clicked on one email that wasn't from my brother or his inner circle. It was from a secondary client I'd quietly nurtured for years, the kind of steady, low-maintenance account that kept the lights on. The subject line was short, pausing until further notice. The body was worse. "We value the work you've done for us, but until internal confusion at your company is resolved, we'll be holding off on further orders. Please let us know when stability returns." I leaned back, staring at the screen. This wasn't just about that one frozen account anymore. It was spreading. Word was getting out that something was broken. And in business, once that idea takes root, it grows faster than any press release can kill it. That's when the group text came in. My parents almost never texted me together, unless it was for birthdays or Christmas greetings. This time it read, "Just help your brother get through this week. You're making this harder than it needs to be." My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed, "Maybe if you'd listened to me 2 years ago, delete." I typed again. "It's not my job to save him anymore. Delete." Third try. "I'm not the one making this harder. Delete." In the end, I sent nothing. I set the phone face down, walked to the window, and just stood there. Outside, light rain had started, each drop sliding slowly down the glass. The sound was soft, rhythmic, like a slow clock ticking. It reminded me of the years I'd spent fixing my brother's mistakes in secret, covering invoices before they became lawsuits, smoothing over clients before they walked, always in silence, always invisible. Now, with each drop of rain, I felt something different, a steady reminder that I wasn't stepping in this time. That clock wasn't counting down to another rescue. It was marking his fall. By 1 o'clock, I couldn't sit in the apartment anymore. I grabbed my coat and walked to a cafe 3 blocks away, the rain misting my hair. I knew exactly what I was doing, making myself impossible to find in the one place he expected me to be. The absence itself was a message. The cafe was quiet, a low hum of soft jazz and clinking cups. I ordered a pot of tea and took the corner table by the window. From there, I could see the street, rain pooling in the gutters, people hurrying with umbrellas. I opened my laptop, not to check emails, but to work on a personal project I'd been neglecting, something that had nothing to do with my family's mess. Half an hour later, my phone buzzed again. A name I hadn't seen in years flashed on the screen, my old mentor. The text was simple. "Your absence is making the rounds in industry circles. People are impressed." I smiled, a slow, private smile. I hadn't planned for it to get this far yet, but clearly the story was traveling faster than I'd expected. They weren't just talking about my brother's chaos. They were talking about me, about the value I'd withheld, about the difference one person could make when she stopped holding everything together. Outside, the rain showed no signs of stopping. Inside, I sipped my tea and let the quiet stretch. Somewhere across town, phones were ringing off the hook, meetings were being called, and for once, I wasn't in any of them. By 3 p.m., my brother was outside my door. The rain had grown heavier since the morning, slapping against the windows like it was trying to get in. The rhythm matched the pounding from the hallway, sharp, impatient, refusing to be ignored. I stayed seated for a moment, staring at the steamless cup of tea on my counter. I'd made it hours ago, set it down, and never touched it. Somehow, it felt like the perfect picture of where I stood now. No warmth left for the people who'd taken me for granted. Another series of knocks, harder this time, made the picture frames on my wall tremble. I glanced at my phone. 16 missed calls from him in the last hour, plus a handful from my mother. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing I was about to hear the same tired script, accusations dressed up as concern, demands disguised as family unity. I unlocked the door and pulled it open. He stood there dripping wet, his hair plastered to his forehead, clothes clinging to him like he'd walked through a storm without even trying to shield himself. His jaw was locked so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Phone in one hand, car keys in the other, he didn't even step inside before firing the first shot. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice was low, but sharp enough to cut glass. I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my tone level. "Why don't you tell me?" He brushed past me without waiting for permission, water dripping onto my floor. "You think disappearing for a couple of weeks is some kind of statement? You think you're making a point? You're hurting the family." There it was. The script. I shut the door behind him and crossed my arms. "Hurting the family or just hurting you?" His eyes narrowed. "You owe us, after everything we've done for you." I almost laughed. "Done for me?" He didn't blink. "Dad co-signed your first place?" "Mom helped you when you were sick. I covered for you when you missed those events. You act like you built this whole thing alone." The twisting of reality was almost artful if it weren't so predictable. "Those weren't debts," I said quietly. "Those were choices you made, same as the choices I made when I worked double shifts to cover the mortgage, or when I cleaned up your messes before they became headlines." He flinched, just barely, but it was there. Then he changed the subject. "A major client pulled out today. Gone. Just like that. Do you understand what that means for us?" "Us?" I repeated. "No. It sounds like it means something for you." For the first time, his voice cracked. "This is spiraling. You think you're making a stand, but you're burning the foundation. We can't afford—" I cut him off, my tone steady as stone. 9 years I kept the foundation steady. 9 years you took that for granted. You were too busy taking credit to notice what it cost me." He stepped closer, lowering his voice like he thought intimidation would work better in a whisper. "Come back tomorrow. We'll work this out. I'll make it right." I shook my head. "Not like this. Not without terms." He blinked, confused, maybe even offended that I had conditions. Then his face hardened again. Without another word, he stormed toward the door, yanking it open so fast the hinges groaned. The slam echoed through the apartment, rattling the same frames his pounding had earlier. The quiet that followed felt heavier than the argument itself. I exhaled slowly, my eyes landing on the cold tea again. I didn't touch it. Then my phone buzzed. A short text lit up the screen. "Call me tonight. I think you'll like what I've heard." It was from my mentor. I slid the phone into my pocket, the sound of rain still hammering the glass. The storm outside might have been relentless, but for the first time that day, I felt the smallest flicker of something different. Anticipation. I dialed my mentor before the tea could go cold. The line barely rang twice before his voice came through, steady, brisk, with an edge of urgency. "Come over now," he said. There's something you need to hear in person. The rain was still coming down hard when I stepped outside, my coat pulled tight against the wind. The sidewalks glistened under the streetlights, every reflection broken and reformed by ripples from the drops. I kept my head down as I made my way toward the parking garage, the sound of tires hissing on wet asphalt, mixing with the distant hum of the city. It wasn't a long drive to his office downtown, but the streets were slow, wipers working overtime, red brake lights glowing in the mist. I used the time to run through possibilities in my head. The tone in his voice told me this wasn't just casual advice. This was something that couldn't wait until morning. By the time I reached the building, my shoes were damp from the short dash across the slick sidewalk. The lobby was warm and softly lit, a sharp contrast to the chill I'd left outside. A receptionist looked up from her desk with a polite smile. "He's expecting you," she said, gesturing toward the elevator. The ride up was quiet, the hum of the cables almost soothing. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway lined with dark wood paneling and old photographs, moments captured from decades of the city's business history. His office was at the far end, door half open, a faint glow spilling into the hall. "Come in," he called as I approached. The room smelled faintly of leather and cedar. Shelves lined the walls, heavy with books and framed awards. Behind his desk, a large window overlooked the rain-slick city streets below. But what caught my eye was a photo on the side table. My mentor, younger, standing beside my father and uncle at the ribbon cutting of the original company office. He noticed my glance. "We were building something real back then," he said quietly, before motioning for me to sit. I eased into the chair across from him. He leaned forward, fingers steepled. "2 major clients came to me this week. Both said the same thing. They want to work with you directly, not the company. You." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard right. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder, sliding it toward me. "Preliminary contracts. Your name's already on them. They're ready if you are." My hand hovered over the folder, but instead of opening it right away, I reached for the pen on his desk, a familiar weight in my hand. It was the same fountain pen I'd used to sign my first employment contract all those years ago. I clicked it once, the sound sharp in the quiet room, before setting it down. He didn't miss the gesture. "You could start your own consulting branch," he continued. "With these accounts as your foundation, you'd be pulling in more than your brother's entire division. It's clean, it's legal, and it's yours if you want it." I let the words sink in. My pulse was steady, but I could feel the shift, like a door cracking open after years of being shut. "And you're sure this wouldn't—" I trailed off, searching for the right way to ask. "It's business," he said firmly, "and it's time you had the freedom to run it your way." I opened the folder then, scanning the documents. Everything was laid out, precise, professional. No traps, no vague promises, just opportunity. Still, I closed it and pushed it back toward him. "One night," I said. "I'll give you my answer tomorrow." He nodded, no pressure in his eyes, just understanding. "Fair enough." I stood, slipping my hands into my coat pockets. My mind was already moving, not on revenge, not even on the satisfaction of proving them wrong, but on what it would mean to build something without chains. As I reached the doorway, he called after me. "By the way, your brother doesn't know about this yet, but someone else in your family does." I paused, my hand on the doorframe, then kept walking without turning back. The rain had eased to a steady drizzle, the city lights reflecting in long streaks across the pavement. I knew exactly who I had to call before midnight. The elevator doors closed behind me, and the city's wet chill still clung to my coat when I stepped into my apartment. I didn't bother turning on the overhead lights. The soft amber glow from the kitchen was enough, spilling across the counter where steam rose from a mug I'd left earlier. I slipped off my shoes, the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant patter of rain against the windows making the room feel smaller, more private. I didn't have to think long about who I was calling. My cousin Mark and I hadn't spoken in years, except for polite hellos at Thanksgiving or the occasional Christmas card. But I knew one thing. He worked in the finance department of the family business. If anyone had eyes on the numbers, it was him. I picked up my phone and found his name. The clock on the microwave read 11:15 p.m. My thumb hovered for a moment before pressing call. He answered on the second ring. "You're up late." His tone was steady, almost too steady, like each word was weighed before it left his mouth. "I had a feeling you'd be too," I said. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." There was a brief pause, then a soft exhale. "I've been waiting for this call." That stopped me. Waiting? I've been watching things from the inside. I know what's been going on, and I know what's about to happen next. The calm in his voice didn't match the weight of the words. My pulse picked up, but I kept my tone even. "Then say it. No vague hints." Another pause, then his voice dropped slightly, as though the walls might be listening. "Your brother's planning to move 2 of your top clients into his personal accounts. Quietly. No announcement, no explanation, just gone. I've seen the internal memos." I gripped the phone tighter, my free hand resting on the cool edge of the counter. "When?" "Next week. They've already drafted the invoices for transition services." Before I could ask more, my phone buzzed with a new message from him. I pulled it up. The photo showed a creased invoice, the kind the finance department sent before big transfers. 2 familiar client names jumped out at me in bold. But what made my jaw tighten was the handwriting at the bottom, notes in blue ink from the executive assistant, the one person I'd always thought stayed neutral in our family battles. "Why would she sign off on this?" I murmured, half to myself. "Because your brother told her this was just a routine consolidation," Mark said. "But I've seen the email chain. They're calling you redundant. They'll use it in the next board meeting to vote you out entirely." The words landed like a cold blade sliding between my ribs. I stared at the photo again, the creases in the paper deep enough to show it had been handled more than once. This wasn't speculation. This was already in motion. I could hear the faint clink of glass on his end, maybe ice in a drink. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this from the rest of them, but I wanted you to know before it's too late." I took a slow breath, letting my mind turn over the information. I didn't mention the contracts my mentor had handed me earlier. That was a card I wasn't ready to lay on the table yet, not even for family. "Keep your head down," I told him. "Don't challenge them. Just keep feeding me what you can. When this is over, you'll be protected. I promise you that." He didn't respond right away, but when he did, his tone had shifted, less guarded, almost relieved. "All right, but you should know, they're meeting tomorrow morning, without you." I checked the time. 11:58 p.m. Then I guess I have a long night ahead of me. We ended the call. I set the phone down next to the untouched mug of tea, now lukewarm. The city outside was quiet, the rain thinning to a mist. My mind was already running ahead, mapping out the moves I'd need to make before dawn. I wasn't invited, but I was going to be there. From across the street, I stood in the chill of a gray winter morning, watching my brother stride toward the building like he owned the place. He adjusted his coat collar, the faintest smirk on his face. A black sedan pulled away from the curb as he disappeared through the revolving door. My phone buzzed in my glove, a text from my cousin. "They've started without you." I took a slow breath, let it frost the air, then crossed at the light. The glass lobby reflected the skyline, all steel and clouds. My boots clicked on the marble floor as I headed for the elevators. No one stopped me. Apparently, my keycard still worked. The 20th floor boardroom was as I remembered. Glass walls on 3 sides, a long table polished to a shine, carafes of coffee and neatly stacked folders waiting at each seat. Through the clear glass door, I could see my brother at the far end, pacing as he spoke. The board members sat in a half-circle, heads tilted in his direction, some nodding, some scribbling notes. My parents were there too, off to one side, silent but watchful. "Her role has become redundant," my brother was saying, voice smooth, like this was already decided. I opened the door. The sound of it clicking shut behind me was loud in the sudden hush. Chairs shifted. The hum of the HVAC was the only thing that moved. My cousin, seated near the end as part of the finance staff, kept his face neutral, but I caught the flicker in his eyes. I set my bag down at an empty chair, but didn't sit. "Thank you all for gathering," I said evenly. "Before any decisions are made, I have updates relevant to every person in this room." My brother's mouth tightened. "This is a closed—" I ignored him and connected my laptop to the projector. The screen lit up with the scanned copy of the transition services invoice from yesterday. I zoomed in on the handwritten notation authorizing the move, the neat, looping script that belonged to the executive assistant who'd been with us for a decade. "Recognize this handwriting?" I asked, letting my eyes sweep the table. "Because it's the same on at least 4 other invoices involving client transfers, all dated before any so-called performance review." A murmur rippled through the room. One of the older board members adjusted his glasses, leaning forward. My brother's jaw worked like he was chewing air. I clicked to the next slide. A chain of internal emails. Subject line: asset reallocation. Dates lined up neatly in the corner, all weeks before anyone had spoken to me about my position. "You'll notice," I continued, "that these transfers coincide perfectly with new accounts appearing under my brother's personal portfolio." That got someone. A woman halfway down the table spoke up, sharp. "This is illegal." My brother tried to recover, throwing out half-formed sentences about my behavior, about team cohesion, but another member cut him off. "Why do these accounts benefit you directly, Daniel?" His face flushed, the confident mask slipping. He glanced toward our parents, but they didn't meet his eyes. I let the pause stretch, then reached into my bag and pulled out a neat stack of documents. "In case there's any doubt, I've already filed a compliance report with the state regulator. These are copies for the board's review." I passed them down the table. Pages flipped, pens scratched notes. The air in the room felt different now, heavier, but in my favor. Finally, the board chair, a man who'd rarely spoken more than a few sentences in my presence, cleared his throat. "This changes everything. We'll adjourn for a private review." I gathered my things without another word, the quiet scrape of my chair the only sound. I knew when I walked out of that room, nothing would be the same. 2 mornings later, I was sitting at my kitchen table, coffee in hand, the winter light bouncing off the river outside my window. The world felt unnervingly still, like the air before a snowstorm. My phone lay face down beside me. I hadn't touched it since last night. I already knew it would be full of noise I wasn't ready to hear. When I finally flipped it over, the screen lit up. 182 missed calls. All from family. Same names over and over. My brother, my mother, my father. Even my sister-in-law, who never called me once in her life unless she needed something. I didn't call anyone back. Instead, I opened my laptop. There it was, the email I'd been waiting for. The subject line was simple: board decision. My pulse quickened, but my hands were steady as I clicked. The message was brief, just a few lines. My brother had been removed from his role as CEO effective immediately. The board had appointed interim leadership until a permanent replacement was confirmed. And me? I was reinstated, not just to my previous position, but promoted to executive oversight with full authority to set the company's future direction. I read it twice. Then I leaned back, letting the quiet sink in. Vindication didn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrived in a plain font email, mid-morning, with coffee still warm in your hand. The phone rang again. Mom. I let it buzz a few times before I picked up. Her voice was sharp, almost shrill. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" "I stopped someone from stealing from the company," I said evenly. "That someone happened to be your son." "You've ruined your brother's career. Do you think this will make you happy? Turning your own family into enemies? I took a slow breath. Family doesn't sabotage you for a paycheck. There was a long silence, then my father's voice cut in on speaker. You've embarrassed us in front of everyone. People are talking. They can talk all they want, I said. I'd rather have them talk about me doing the right thing than watch me play along with corruption. I hung up before they could answer. My heart was steady. Around noon, the front desk in my building called. He says he's your brother, the concierge whispered, but he looks shaken. When I stepped into the lobby, he was standing there, shoulders slumped, eyes red. I just wanted to explain, he said quietly. I did it for the company. You know how bad things were getting. I didn't bother arguing. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, the same compliance report I'd given the board. His signature was right there on the authorization lines. I handed it to him. This was for you, I said. No one else signed it. His lips parted, but no words came out. I turned and walked back to the elevator. Later that afternoon, I met my cousin at a quiet cafe by the river. He'd been my one steady ally through all of this. We talked about the company's future, restructuring, new safeguards to keep family politics out of business decisions. He nodded along, taking notes, already thinking 10 steps ahead. When the sun dipped low, I walked home along the river. The water caught the last light, turning it gold, then deep orange. I thought about the years I'd given to building something, about the nights I'd stayed up working while others slept, and now, finally, I was steering the course myself, and that's when I realized sometimes walking away is the loudest statement you can make.